I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped outside and saw my garage door wide open on that frozen February morning in Rochester, Minnesota. My name is Wesley Ackerman, and I had spent the better part of yesterday afternoon carefully organizing 12 industrial bags of premium ice melt in my garage. Each 50-pound bag had cost me nearly $40, and I needed every single one of them. Not just for my driveway and walkway, but for my small snow removal business that helped me make ends meet during the brutal Minnesota winters. What made these bags special, though, was something nobody knew about except me and the Rochester Police Department. I walked closer to the garage, my breath forming clouds in the negative 10-degree air. The concrete floor where I had stacked those bags was completely empty. Not a single bag remained. My heart sank as I pulled out my phone and immediately called the non-emergency police line. "Rochester Police, how can I help you?" the dispatcher answered. "Hi, this is Wesley Ackerman at 2847 Pinewood Drive in the Meadowbrook Hills subdivision. I need to report a theft. Someone broke into my garage and stole 12 bags of ice melt." There was a pause. "Ice melt, sir?" "Yes, but these are special. They are part of the municipal tracking program. Each bag has a GPS tracker embedded in it, linked directly to your database. The purchase order number is RPD 2025-0847. The dispatcher's tone changed immediately. "Hold on, sir. Let me pull that up." I heard typing in the background. "Yes, I see it here. Mr. Ackerman, an officer will be at your location within 15 minutes. In the meantime, I am activating the tracking system now. Please do not approach whoever has the bags if you locate them first." "Understood," I said, feeling a small sense of relief. The tracking program was something the Rochester Police Department had started 6 months ago after a series of thefts in various neighborhoods. They had partnered with local hardware stores and supply companies to embed GPS trackers in high-value items that were frequently stolen. Ice melt, during Minnesota winters, was like gold. People would steal it right off porches and out of garages. I had signed up for the program after my previous supply had been stolen in December. I walked back inside my house, grabbed my laptop, and logged into the police portal they had given me access to. The screen loaded, showing a map of Rochester. 12 blue dots appeared on the screen, all clustered together, and they were moving. I zoomed in and watched as the dots traveled down Pinewood Drive, turned left onto Meadowbrook Avenue, and then stopped at a house just 4 blocks away from mine. My jaw clenched. The address was 2901 Meadowbrook Avenue. I knew exactly whose house that was: Brenda Whitmore. Brenda was the president of our homeowners association, and she was the most insufferable person I had ever encountered. She was 52 years old, had short blonde hair that she kept in that classic Karen style with the sharp angles, and she wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck like some kind of authority badge. She drove a white Mercedes SUV with a custom license plate that read HOA Boss, which should have been everyone's first warning sign. Since moving into Meadowbrook Hills 2 years ago, I had received 17 violation notices from Brenda. My grass was a 1/4 inch too tall. My trash bins were visible from the street for 15 minutes past the allowed time. My mailbox post needed repainting. My holiday decorations were up 2 days past the January 5th deadline. The list went on and on. Each violation came with a $50 fine that she insisted I pay within 10 days or face escalating consequences. I had tried to be reasonable. I had tried to follow the rules, but Brenda seemed to take personal pleasure in finding new ways to fine me and make my life miserable. Just last week, she had left a notice on my door stating that my snow removal vehicle, a perfectly legal pickup truck with a plow attachment, was commercial equipment and therefore banned from being parked in my own driveway overnight. She demanded I rent a storage unit or face a $200 fine. And now, apparently, she had escalated from petty tyranny to actual theft. The doorbell rang exactly 14 minutes after my call. I opened it to find Officer Martinez, a young woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "Mr. Ackerman, I am Officer Martinez. I understand you have had a theft of tracked merchandise." "Yes, come in," I said, stepping aside, "and I know exactly where the bags are." I showed her my laptop screen. She leaned in, studying the map, then pulled out her own tablet and tapped a few times. "Yes, I have got the same read. They are stationary now at 2901 Meadowbrook Avenue. Do you know who lives there?" "Brenda Whitmore. She is the HOA president. She has been harassing me since I moved in." Officer Martinez's expression shifted slightly. "Brenda Whitmore. I have responded to calls in this neighborhood before involving her. She filed 3 separate noise complaints against the Thompson family last summer that were all unfounded." "That sounds about right," I muttered. "Okay, here is what is going to happen. I am going to request backup, and then we are going to go have a conversation with Miss Whitmore. I need you to come with us to verify the bags are yours. Can you describe any identifying marks on them?" "Each bag has my business stamp on it. Blue ink stamp that says Ackerman Snow Removal Services with my phone number. I stamp all my supplies." "Perfect. Let me make a call." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the back of Officer Martinez's patrol car as we drove the 4 blocks to Brenda's house. A second patrol car followed behind us. The GPS dots on the tracker had not moved at all. Brenda lived in one of the larger homes in the subdivision, a 2-story colonial with perfect landscaping and a circular driveway. Her white Mercedes was parked out front, along with a silver Lexus that I assumed belonged to her husband, Greg. I had met Greg exactly twice, and both times he had looked like a man whose soul had been slowly crushed over many years. Officer Martinez parked in front of the house, and we all got out. The other 2 officers, an older man named Officer Chen and a younger guy named Officer Russo, flanked us as we walked up to the front door. Officer Martinez rang the doorbell. I heard footsteps inside, and then the door swung open. Brenda stood there in a cream-colored sweater and perfectly pressed khakis, her glasses dangling from their chain. Her expression of polite curiosity shifted immediately to annoyance when she saw me. "Wesley, what is this about? And why are the police here?" Her voice had that particular pitch that could probably shatter glass. Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Miss Whitmore, I am Officer Martinez with the Rochester Police Department. We are investigating a theft that occurred this morning. May we come in?" Brenda's face flushed slightly. "A theft? I do not know anything about any theft, and I do not appreciate being accused, madam. Nobody is accusing you of anything yet," Officer Martinez said calmly. "We just need to ask you some questions. May we come in?" Brenda looked like she wanted to refuse, but with 3 police officers standing on her porch, she finally stepped aside. "Fine, but I am calling my lawyer." "That is your right, madam," Officer Martinez said. We entered the house, which was exactly as I expected. Immaculately decorated in that generic upscale style with lots of beige and white, everything in its perfect place. Not a speck of dust anywhere. We stood in the foyer while Brenda pulled out her phone. "Before you do that," Officer Martinez said, "I need to ask you, do you have any ice melt or de-icing products in your home or garage that you acquired within the last 12 hours? Brenda's eyes narrowed. "I have ice melt, yes. I bought it legally. This is ridiculous." "Can you show us where it is?" It is in my garage. I purchased it fair and square from someone who was selling it. There is nothing illegal about that. My stomach tightened, so she was not even denying having it. Officer Martinez nodded to Officer Chen, who spoke up. "Madam, can you tell us who you purchased it from and when?" Brenda crossed her arms. "Early this morning. Someone posted on the neighborhood Facebook group that they had extra bags of ice melt for sale at a good price. I met them at the community park entrance about 2 hours ago and bought 12 bags. I paid cash." "Can you describe this person?" Officer Martinez asked. "It was dark and cold. They were wearing a winter coat and hat. I did not pay that much attention. Male or female, I do not know. Medium height. They had the bags in their truck." "What kind of truck?" "I do not know trucks. Dark colored, maybe blue or black." Officer Martinez and Officer Chen exchanged a glance. "Miss Whitmore, those bags of ice melt were stolen from Mr. Ackerman's garage earlier this morning. They are his property." Brenda's face went from pink to red. "I did not steal anything. I paid good money for those bags. If someone sold me stolen property, that is not my fault." "Madam, we are going to need to see the bags and verify ownership. Please show us to your garage." Brenda let out an exasperated sigh that could have powered a wind turbine. "This is harassment. I am the victim here. I was scammed by someone, and now you are treating me like a criminal." But she led us through her pristine kitchen to the door that connected to her garage. She hit the button to turn on the lights, and there they were. 12 bags of premium ice melt stacked neatly against the wall. My bags. I stepped forward and pointed. "Those are mine. You can see my business stamp on the front of each one." Officer Martinez approached and examined the bags. Sure enough, each one had my blue stamp clearly visible. She took photos with her tablet, then turned to Brenda. "Miss Whitmore, these bags are confirmed stolen property. We are going to need to seize them as evidence." "Evidence? I am the one who was scammed." Brenda's voice was reaching that particular frequency again. "Madam, I understand you are upset, but we need to investigate further. Can you provide any proof of this transaction? Any texts or messages from the supposed seller?" Brenda pulled out her phone and started scrolling furiously. The post was on the neighborhood Facebook group. "Let me find it." She scrolled and scrolled, her expression growing more confused. "It was here this morning. Someone posted about ice melt for sale." Officer Martinez waited patiently. After several minutes of searching, Brenda lowered her phone. "It is gone. The post is not there anymore. Do you remember the name of the person who posted it?" "It was just some generic name. I think it said Minnesota Winter Supply or something like that." Officer Chen was writing all this down. "And you met this person at the community park entrance at what time?" "Around 6:30 this morning." I spoke up. "I noticed the theft around 7:45 when I went outside, but my garage was definitely closed and locked when I went to bed at 11 last night." Officer Martinez nodded, taking notes. "Mr. Ackerman, is there any damage to your garage door or locks?" "No, that is the weird thing. There was no forced entry. The door was just open when I found it this morning." Officer Russo, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Does anyone else have access to your garage? Family members, friends?" "No, it is just me. I live alone. I have an automatic opener with a code, but nobody else knows it." Brenda suddenly straightened up. "Wait a minute. As HOA president, I have master access codes for all properties in case of emergencies. That is in the covenant that everyone signed when they purchased their homes." I felt my blood pressure spike. "Are you saying you have the code to my garage?" "Not just me. The HOA board has access to all codes for emergency purposes. It is standard procedure." Officer Martinez's expression hardened. "Miss Whitmore, do you have Mr. Ackerman's garage code?" "Well, yes, but I did not use it. I was not even at his house this morning. Who else is on the HOA board and has access to these codes? Brenda rattled off 3 names. Vice President Patricia Miller, Treasurer Robert Chen, and Secretary Jennifer Lawson. Officer Chen looked up from his notepad. Any relation? Officer Chen shook his head. Different Chen. Common name. Officer Martinez crossed her arms. Miss Whitmore, I need you to provide us with a list of everyone who has access to Mr. Ackerman's garage code. This is now potentially a breaking and entering case in addition to theft. I did not break into anything, Brenda protested. But someone did, and if they use the code that the HOA has on file, that creates a serious liability issue. We will need to speak with all board members. The next hour was a blur of statements, phone calls, and increasingly frantic explanations from Brenda. Officers Martinez, Chen, and Russo loaded all 12 bags of ice melt into their patrol cars to take back to the station as evidence. Brenda stood in her driveway, arms crossed, looking like she wanted to spontaneously combust. I paid $400 for those bags, she kept saying. $400 to some scammer. Officer Martinez was not sympathetic. Madam, I have to ask, why did you need 12 50-pound bags of ice melt? That is enough to de-ice a parking lot. Brenda's face flushed again. For the neighborhood. I was planning to distribute it to the common areas and walkways. As HOA president, it is my responsibility to maintain safe conditions. The HOA does not have its own budget for supplies like that. We do. But I thought this was a good deal. I was trying to save the association money. I could not help myself. Or you saw an opportunity to buy stolen goods on the cheap and claim it as an HOA expense later. How dare you? Brenda whirled on me. I have dedicated countless hours to this community. I maintain property values. I ensure standards are upheld. And this is the thanks I get. False accusations. Officer Martinez stepped between us. Mr. Ackerman, please. Miss Whitmore, we are going to need you to come down to the station to make a formal statement about this transaction. Am I under arrest? No, madam, not at this time. But we need a detailed statement, and we need to investigate further. If you are truly a victim of a scam as you claim, we need all the information you can provide to catch the person who did this. Brenda's husband Greg appeared in the doorway of the house. He was a thin man with gray hair and the perpetually exhausted expression of someone who had given up fighting years ago. Brenda, what is going on? Nothing, Greg, just some misunderstanding. Go back inside. The police are loading bags into their cars. I said go inside, Brenda snapped. Greg retreated immediately, and I felt a pang of sympathy for him. Officer Martinez finished up her notes. Miss Whitmore, can you be at the station by 2 o'clock this afternoon? I suppose I have no choice. You do have a choice, madam, but it would be in your best interest to cooperate with the investigation. As we prepared to leave, Officer Martinez turned to me. Mr. Ackerman, we will need you to come in as well to make a formal statement and verify the bags once they are logged into evidence. Of course, whatever you need. We left Brenda standing in her driveway, still clutching her phone, looking like her entire worldview had just been disrupted. I rode back to my house with Officer Martinez. What do you think happened? I asked as we pulled up to my house. Officer Martinez put the car in park. Honestly, I have seen enough cases involving HOAs to know that things can get really weird. Some HOA board members develop this sense of entitlement where they think the rules don't apply to them, or that they have more authority than they actually do. The fact that she admitted to having master access codes to residents' properties is already a red flag. Is that even legal? Depends on what is in your HOA covenant. You should pull out your paperwork and read through it carefully. But even if it is technically allowed, Using that access without proper cause could be criminal trespass. So you think she did break into my garage? I think it is one possibility. Another possibility is that she is telling the truth and someone else stole your bags and then sold them to her, knowing she would buy them. But who would do that? And why? Officer Martinez shrugged. People do strange things for money. 12 bags at $40 each is nearly $500 worth of merchandise. If someone sold them to her for $400 cash, that is a quick profit for about an hour's work. But they would have needed my garage code. Exactly, which brings us back to the HOA. We need to find out who else had access to that code and where they were this morning. I thanked Officer Martinez and went back inside my house. The whole situation felt surreal. I pulled out my laptop and started digging through my files for the HOA covenant documents I had signed when I purchased the house. It took me 20 minutes to find them buried in a folder labeled Closing Documents. I started reading through the dense legal language, and about 15 pages in, I found it. Section 12, subsection D. The Board of Directors shall maintain master access codes and keys for all properties within the community for emergency access purposes, including but not limited to fire, flood, structural damage, or other situations requiring immediate entry to prevent harm to persons or property. Nowhere did it say that the board could use these codes for any other reason. Certainly nothing about entering properties to steal ice melt. I called the number Officer Martinez had given me. She answered on the second ring. Martinez. Hi, it is Wesley Ackerman. I found the section about the access codes in my HOA documents. It specifically says they are only for emergency access. Good. Can you email me a copy of that section? Yes, I will send it right now. Perfect. That helps establish that if someone used your code without an emergency, it is criminal trespass regardless of whether they are on the HOA board. I am going to start making calls to the other board members. We should have more information by this afternoon. I spent the rest of the morning trying to focus on work. I had 3 driveways scheduled for plowing that afternoon, but without my ice melt supply, I could only offer partial service. I called each client and explained the situation. They were all understanding, though I could tell they were disappointed. At 1:30, I drove down to the Rochester Police Department headquarters on 4th Street. The building was a modern structure with lots of glass and concrete. I checked in at the front desk and was escorted to a conference room where Officer Martinez was waiting with a senior detective. Mr. Ackerman, this is Detective Harris. He has taken over the investigation. Detective Harris was a man in his mid-40s with graying hair and the weary expression of someone who had seen everything. We shook hands, and he gestured for me to sit. Mr. Ackerman, I have reviewed the case file and the tracking data. I have to say, this is one of the more interesting thefts I have dealt with lately. The good news is the GPS trackers did their job perfectly. The bad news is that we have a complicated situation with your HOA. What did you find out? We spoke with the other 3 board members this morning. All 3 confirmed that they have access to the master codes database, which is kept in a shared encrypted file that all 4 board members can access. However, the file has access logs, and according to the IT company that manages it, your specific code was accessed at 5:45 this morning. My heart started beating faster. By who? By Brenda Whitmore. I felt a rush of vindication mixed with anger, so she did break into my garage. Detective Harris held up a hand. Not necessarily. She claims she accessed the file because she was doing routine audit checks. According to her, she reviews the access codes quarterly to make sure they are all up to date, and this morning was her scheduled review time. That is convenient. My thoughts exactly. But here is where it gets interesting. We pulled security footage from the community park entrance where she claims she met the seller. The camera is not great quality in the dark, but we can see her Mercedes pull up at 6:28 this morning. A dark-colored pickup truck was already there, parked with its lights off. Someone gets out of the truck. There is a brief conversation. Bags are transferred from the truck to her SUV. She hands over what appears to be cash, and then both vehicles leave. The whole transaction took less than 5 minutes. So someone really did sell her the bags. It appears so. We are trying to enhance the footage to get a license plate on the truck, but the angle is not great. But if Brenda accessed my garage code at 5:45, and the theft probably happened between midnight and 7 in the morning, that is not a coincidence. I agree. Which is why we are going deeper. We are getting a warrant for her phone records and her Mercedes's GPS history to see where she actually was during those hours. Officer Martinez spoke up. We are also checking whether she has a second vehicle or access to a truck that matches the description. Her husband drives a Lexus, I said. I have never seen them with a truck. We are checking that too, Detective Harris said. But here is another angle. Brenda claims she saw a post on the neighborhood Facebook group about ice melt for sale. We have been in contact with Facebook's law enforcement liaison, and they are pulling the data on that group to see if such a post existed and who created it. She said the post was gone when she looked for it again. Right, which means someone deleted it. If we can trace the account that made the post, we might find our thief. I spent the next hour giving a detailed statement about the theft, my history with Brenda and the HOA, and everything I knew about the access code situation. By the time I finished, it was almost 3:30 in the afternoon. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait for the warrants and the data to come back. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you change your garage code and any other access codes you have for your property. Already planning on it. Good. We will be in touch as soon as we know more. I drove home feeling mentally exhausted. The temperature had dropped even further, and the sky was that particular gray color that promised more snow. I pulled into my driveway and immediately went to the garage keypad to change the code. As I was finishing up, my neighbor from across the street, Tom Hendricks, walked over. Tom was a retired firefighter in his 60s, a big guy with a white beard who looked like he could still break down doors if needed. "Hey Wesley, I heard there was some excitement at Brenda's place this morning. Police cars and everything. Yeah, someone stole my ice melt and apparently sold it to her." Tom's eyes widened. "No kidding, that is ballsy. Tell me about it. You know, I was up early this morning. Around 6:15. I was having my coffee and looking out the window when I saw a dark truck driving real slow down the street. It stopped in front of your house for a minute, then drove off." My pulse quickened. "What kind of truck?" "Looked like a Dodge Ram, maybe 10 years old. Dark blue or black, hard to tell in that light. It had one of those tonneau covers on the bed." "Did you see the driver?" "Nah, too dark and too far away. But I remember thinking it was odd because it just sat there for a bit, like they were checking addresses or something." "Tom, you need to call Detective Harris at the RPD and tell him this." I pulled out the card Detective Harris had given me and handed it to Tom. "You think it is related to your theft?" "I think it is very related. The same truck was at the park entrance where Brenda bought my stolen ice melt." Tom whistled low. "Well, I will be damned. Yeah, I will call right now." I thanked Tom and went inside. My mind was racing. If Tom saw the truck in front of my house around 6:15 and the transaction at the park happened at 6:28, that was a tight timeline. The park entrance was only about 10 minutes from my house, so it could work. The thief could have stolen the bags any time during the night, waited until morning, driven past my house one more time to make sure no one was around, then headed straight to meet Brenda. But that still left the question: how did they get into my garage? If Brenda accessed my code at 5:45 and the truck was at my house at 6:15, did she give the code to someone? My phone rang. It was Detective Harris. "Mr. Ackerman, your neighbor just called me. Very helpful information. I am sending a unit to take his statement and show him some vehicle photos." "You think you know who it is?" "Possibly. The description matches a vehicle registered to someone we have been looking at. I cannot say more right now, but we are making progress." "What about Brenda?" "Still waiting on warrants. Should have them within the hour. Her lawyer showed up and is making noise, but that is standard. We will get to the bottom of this." I hung up and tried to focus on making dinner, but I kept checking my phone every 5 minutes. Finally, around 7 o'clock, Detective Harris called again. "Mr. Ackerman, we need you to come back down to the station. We have someone in custody and we need you to confirm some things." "You caught them. Just come down. I will explain when you get here." 20 minutes later, I was back at the police station, sitting in the same conference room. Detective Harris came in with Officer Martinez and another detective I had not met. "Mr. Ackerman, we executed the warrants on Brenda Whitmore's phone and vehicle. The GPS history from her Mercedes shows that she was at her home from 11:30 last night until 6:20 this morning when she left for the park. So unless she somehow teleported, she did not personally steal your bags. But she accessed my code." "She did. And her phone records show something very interesting. At 5:48 this morning, 3 minutes after accessing your garage code, she sent a text message to a phone number registered to a man named Dylan Carpenter. The message contained only a series of numbers, your garage code." I felt my jaw drop. She sent my code to someone else. It appears so. Dylan Carpenter is 32 years old, has a record for petty theft and burglary, and drives a 2015 Dodge Ram, dark blue. Your neighbor identified his truck from a photo array. So Brenda hired someone to rob me. We are still piecing it together. Carpenter is in custody now. We picked him up an hour ago. He is asking for a lawyer, so we have not gotten a full statement yet, but we found some interesting things when we searched his truck. Detective Harris pulled out his tablet and showed me photos. Empty ice melt bags with my blue stamp on them. We found these in a dumpster behind Carpenter's apartment. He apparently kept a few bags for himself and sold the rest to Brenda. This is insane. It gets better. We also found text messages between Carpenter and Brenda going back 3 months. They have been in contact regularly, and some of those messages are about you specifically. He showed me screenshots. My stomach turned as I read them. "Brenda, that Ackerman guy is a problem, always complaining about the fines. We need to find a way to make him leave." "Dylan, I can make problems for him if you want." "Brenda, nothing obvious, but if his life gets difficult enough, he will sell and move. That is what happened with the Johnsons." "Dylan, I remember. That was fun." My hands were shaking. "She has been harassing me on purpose to force me out." "It looks that way. We are going back through other cases now. The Johnsons were a family that lived in your neighborhood 2 years ago. They filed multiple police reports about vandalism and theft before they finally sold their house and moved. We are reopening those cases." "So what happens to Brenda now?" "We are bringing her in for questioning again. With this evidence, she is facing charges of conspiracy to commit burglary, theft, and possibly criminal harassment. If we can tie her to other incidents, the charges will multiply." "Good." Detective Harris leaned back in his chair. "I have to ask, Mr. Ackerman, why did you have GPS trackers in bags of ice melt? That is not standard." because this is not the first time someone stole from me. Back in December, I lost about $800 worth of supplies from my garage. That is when I signed up for the police tracking program. I figured if it happened again, at least we could catch whoever did it. Well, your instinct paid off. These trackers led us right to the thieves, and the investigation uncovered a much bigger pattern of HOA abuse. Over the next week, the case exploded into a major story in Rochester. Local news picked it up, then regional outlets, and eventually it made national headlines. HOA president orchestrates burglaries to drive out homeowners. The investigation revealed that Brenda had been working with Dylan Carpenter for nearly 2 years. They had targeted at least 7 different homeowners in Meadowbrook Hills, all people who Brenda deemed problematic for various reasons. Some had challenged her authority. Some had questioned HOA fines. Some had simply rubbed her the wrong way. Dylan would commit small acts of vandalism or theft, nothing major enough to warrant serious police investigation, but enough to make the homeowners feel unsafe and uncomfortable. Over time, most of them sold their houses and left. Brenda would then ensure that the new buyers were more suitable residents who would not cause her problems. The Johnsons, the family I had heard about, had suffered the worst. Over 8 months, they had experienced slashed tires, a broken mailbox, stolen packages, and graffiti on their fence. They filed multiple police reports, but without evidence, nothing came of it. Finally, exhausted and scared, they sold their house at a loss and moved to a different city. When detectives interviewed them as part of the reopened investigation, Mrs. Johnson broke down crying. "We loved that house. It was our dream home, but we could not take it anymore. We felt like we were under siege." Brenda was arrested and charged with 9 counts of conspiracy to commit burglary, 6 counts of criminal conspiracy, 3 counts of harassment, and 1 count of criminal trespass for illegally accessing my garage code. Dylan Carpenter was charged with 7 counts of burglary, multiple counts of theft, and various other crimes. The bail hearing was packed. I sat in the gallery with Tom Hendricks and several other neighbors. Brenda showed up in a conservative dark suit, her hair perfect, her lawyer by her side. She looked composed until the prosecutor started reading the charges and the evidence against her. "Your Honor, the defendant used her position as HOA president to systematically target and harass homeowners, causing emotional distress and financial losses. She conspired with Dylan Carpenter to commit multiple burglaries and acts of vandalism. She illegally accessed private security codes and shared them with a known criminal. This represents a profound abuse of trust and authority." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Anderson, looked at Brenda over her reading glasses. "Miss Whitmore, these are serious charges. The prosecution is requesting bail be set at $250,000 given the number of victims and the sophisticated nature of the conspiracy." Brenda's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client is a respected member of the community with deep roots in Rochester. She is not a flight risk. We ask that she be released on her own recognizance." "A respected member of the community who is accused of orchestrating a criminal enterprise to terrorize her neighbors," the judge said dryly. "Bail is set at $200,000. Next case." Brenda's face went pale. I watched as she was led away, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked small and defeated. The fallout in the HOA was immediate and dramatic. The other 3 board members all resigned within days of Brenda's arrest. A special election was held, and a completely new board was voted in, led by Tom Hendricks as the new president. One of Tom's first acts was to vote to refund all of the fines that Brenda had issued over the past 2 years. I got back nearly $800. The new board also immediately changed the policy on access codes. No longer would the board maintain master codes for properties. Instead, homeowners were asked to provide emergency contact information and one trusted person who could grant access if needed. The old system was completely dismantled. Dylan Carpenter took a plea deal. He agreed to testify against Brenda in exchange for a reduced sentence of 12 years. At his sentencing, he gave a statement that chilled everyone in the courtroom. Brenda made it sound like we were just doing HOA enforcement, like these people were breaking rules and deserved consequences. But I knew what we were doing was wrong. I did it anyway because she paid well and because I was on drugs. I am sorry to everyone we hurt. I know sorry does not fix anything, but I am saying it anyway. Brenda's trial took place 4 months later. I testified about my stolen ice melt and about the years of harassment I had endured. The Johnsons testified about their ordeal. 5 other former residents came forward with similar stories. The evidence was overwhelming. Brenda's defense tried to argue that Dylan had acted independently and that she had no knowledge of his criminal activities. But the text messages told a different story. Message after message showed her directing him, suggesting targets, even coordinating timing to ensure maximum impact with minimal risk of getting caught. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, Judge Anderson did not mince words. Miss Whitmore, you took a position of trust and authority and corrupted it beyond recognition. You terrorized people in their own homes. You drove families from the community. You did all of this not for profit, but for power and control. You wanted a neighborhood that conformed to your vision, and you were willing to destroy lives to get it. Brenda received a sentence of 18 years in prison. Her husband Greg filed for divorce before the ink on the judgment was even dry. The story became a cautionary tale about HOA abuse and the dangers of unchecked authority in residential communities. Legal experts weighed in. Consumer advocates called for HOA reform. Several states, including Minnesota, began drafting legislation to add oversight and accountability to homeowners associations. As for me, I finally had peace. My garage was secure with a new code that only I knew. My ice melt business grew as word spread about what had happened. People liked supporting the guy who had taken down a corrupt HOA president. I hired 2 employees and bought a second truck. Tom Hendricks turned out to be an excellent HOA president. He focused on actual community improvement rather than petty rule enforcement. Violations were handled with warnings and friendly conversations instead of immediate fines. The neighborhood felt friendlier, more relaxed. One evening about 6 months after the trial, I was sitting on my front porch enjoying a beer when Tom walked over. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, grab a seat." Tom settled into the other chair with a grunt. "I wanted to tell you we got some interesting news today. Brenda's house finally sold." "Yeah, I figured it would sit on the market forever given everything that happened. You would think." But apparently some young couple bought it. They are both lawyers, ironically enough. They specialize in HOA law. I laughed. "Of course they do. They seem nice. I met them when they came to look at the place last week. They said they specifically wanted to live in this neighborhood because of what happened. They thought a community that stood up against corruption was worth being part of." "That is actually pretty cool." Tom took a sip of his beer. "You know, in a weird way, we all owe you a debt. If you had not had those GPS trackers in your ice melt, Brenda might still be running her little criminal empire. Who knows how many more families she would have driven out. I was just trying to protect my property. I did not expect to uncover a conspiracy." Sometimes that is how it happens. You do one small thing to stand up for yourself, and it exposes something much bigger. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. It was early August, warm and pleasant, a far cry from that frozen February morning when this all started. Kids were riding bikes in the street. Neighbors were out walking dogs. It felt like a real community now, not a dictatorship. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Detective Harris, who I had stayed in touch with. Thought you would want to know. The Johnson family is moving back to Rochester. They bought a house 3 blocks from you, said they wanted to come home. I showed the text to Tom and he grinned. See, good things can come from standing up to bullies. Even better things come from GPS trackers and ice melt, I said. Tom laughed and raised his beer. To GPS trackers. To GPS trackers, I echoed, and we clinked bottles. The following months brought more positive changes to Meadowbrook Hills. The new HOA board, under Tom's leadership, implemented quarterly community meetings where residents could voice concerns and suggestions without fear of retaliation. The meetings were well attended and actually productive. We started a neighborhood watch program, but unlike Brenda's version, which had been about spying on people for code violations, ours was focused on actual safety and community building. We organized block parties, holiday events, and even a community garden in one of the common areas. I reconnected with the Johnsons when they moved back in September. Mark and Linda Johnson were in their late 30s with 2 kids, ages 8 and 10. We met at a welcome back party that Tom organized at the community center. I cannot believe we are actually back, Linda said, her eyes bright with happy tears. After everything that happened, we never thought we would feel safe here again. I am glad you gave us another chance, I said. Mark shook my head. We read every article about the case. What Brenda did to you was the same pattern she used on us. When we heard she was going to prison, it felt like justice, not just for us, but for everyone. Their kids were already running around with the other neighborhood children, playing without worry. It was the kind of scene that should have always been normal, but had been impossible under Brenda's reign. As fall arrived and the leaves started changing, I found myself reflecting on the entire experience. It had started with such a simple thing, bags of ice melt. I had never imagined that protecting my supplies with GPS trackers would lead to exposing years of criminal harassment and abuse. The local hardware store where I had purchased the tracked ice melt reported a 300% increase in requests for GPS-monitored products. The police tracking program expanded to include other frequently stolen items. Crime rates for property theft dropped significantly across Rochester. I was invited to speak at a community safety forum in November. The auditorium was packed with homeowners from various HOAs across the city, all wanting to know how to prevent their associations from becoming corrupt. The key thing, I told the audience, is accountability. No one person should have unchecked power in an HOA. There need to be multiple board members who hold each other accountable. There needs to be transparency in decision-making, and residents need to feel safe speaking up without fear of retaliation. A woman in the audience raised her hand. But what if your HOA president is already abusing their power? What can we do? Document everything, I said. Keep records of all communications, all fines, all interactions. If something seems wrong, trust your instinct. Report it to local authorities if necessary. And consider getting legal advice. There are lawyers who specialize in HOA disputes. After the forum, several people approached me with their own horror stories about HOA abuse. I listened to each one and provided contact information for Detective Harris, and for the lawyers I had consulted during my case. It was clear that Brenda's situation was not unique. There were petty tyrants in HOAs all over the country, drunk on their tiny bit of power. Winter returned to Minnesota, and with it came the need for ice melt again. This time, I ordered double my usual supply and stored half of it in a locked shed with cameras and additional security. The other half went in my garage, also now equipped with security cameras. I did not need the GPS trackers anymore. The police tracking program had served its purpose in my case. But I kept one bag, tracker still active, sitting prominently in the front of my garage. A reminder of what had happened and a deterrent to anyone who might think about stealing from me again. Business was booming. Word had spread not just locally but regionally about the guy with the tracked ice melt who took down a corrupt HOA. I got calls from homeowners as far away as Minneapolis and St. Cloud asking if I could service their areas. I had to hire 2 more employees and lease a 3rd truck to keep up with demand. In January, almost a year after the original theft, I received a letter in the mail. It was from the Minnesota State Legislature. They had passed a new law, nicknamed Brenda's Law by the media, which required all HOAs in the state to carry liability insurance, undergo annual audits, and provide residents with a clear process for appealing fines and decisions. The law also made it a felony for HOA board members to abuse their access to private property. The letter thanked me for my testimony during the committee hearings and said my case had been instrumental in getting the legislation passed. I felt a sense of pride that something positive and lasting had come from my ordeal. Greg Whitmore, Brenda's ex-husband, stopped by my house one afternoon in February. I almost did not recognize him at first. He had grown a beard, lost weight, and looked 10 years younger than when I had last seen him. "Wesley, I hope you do not mind me stopping by," he said, standing nervously on my porch. "No, come in. Can I get you some coffee? That would be great." We sat in my kitchen, and Greg wrapped his hands around his mug like he was trying to draw warmth from it, even though my house was perfectly heated. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally, "for everything Brenda did. I did not know the extent of it until the trial, I swear. I knew she was intense about the HOA, but I had no idea she was doing illegal things." "You do not have to apologize for her actions," I said. "You were not involved. But I was married to her. I lived in that house. I should have seen the signs. I should have questioned things more." "She manipulated a lot of people, Greg. Do not beat yourself up." He nodded, but I could tell he was still carrying guilt. "The divorce was final last month. I moved to an apartment downtown. I am starting over. How are you doing?" "Better than I have in years, honestly. It is like I can finally breathe. I did not realize how much stress I was carrying until it was gone." We talked for over an hour. Greg told me about his plans to take early retirement from his accounting firm and maybe travel a bit. He had never been allowed to travel much because Brenda always said the HOA needed her and she could not leave. As he was leaving, Greg turned back to me. "Thank you for standing up to her. I wish I had done it years ago." After he left, I thought about how many people Brenda had affected. Not just the homeowners she terrorized, but her own husband, the other board members who had been too intimidated to question her, even Dylan Carpenter, who she had manipulated into committing crimes. Spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and renewal. The neighborhood looked better than it had in years. Without Brenda's oppressive rules, people felt free to personalize their homes within reasonable limits. One family painted their front door a cheerful red. Another family added window boxes with flowers. Small touches that made the neighborhood feel more vibrant and lived in rather than sterile and controlled. The community garden that we had started was thriving. Residents had plots where they grew vegetables and flowers. It became a gathering place where neighbors chatted and got to know each other. The sense of community that Brenda had tried to manufacture through fear and control was now developing naturally through genuine connection. In May, I was contacted by a producer from a true crime podcast who wanted to do an episode about the case. I agreed to be interviewed, thinking it might help other people recognize signs of HOA abuse in their own communities. The episode aired in June and became one of the podcast's most downloaded episodes. I received emails from people all over the country sharing their own HOA horror stories. Some were dealing with situations similar to what I had experienced. Others were dealing with different types of abuse, but the common thread was HOA board members drunk on power. I started a blog to share resources and advice. I was not an expert, just someone who had been through it and come out the other side, but people seemed to find it helpful. The blog grew, and I connected with lawyers, consumer advocates, and other homeowners who were fighting their own battles. In August, I attended a city council meeting where they were discussing additional HOA oversight measures. I was asked to speak about my experience. As I stood at the podium looking out at the council members and the packed gallery, I felt a sense of purpose. A year and a half ago, someone stole 12 bags of ice melt from my garage, I began. It seemed like a simple property crime, annoying but not life-changing. But those bags had GPS trackers, and when we tracked them down, we uncovered something much bigger. We discovered that the president of my HOA had been running a criminal enterprise designed to terrorize and drive out homeowners she did not like. I talked about the investigation, the trial, and the aftermath. I talked about the families who had been hurt and the positive changes that had come from exposing the corruption. The lesson I learned is that small acts of standing up for yourself can have ripple effects you never imagine. If I had not put trackers in my ice melt, if I had not reported the theft, if I had not followed through with the investigation, Brenda Whitmore would still be abusing her power. More families would have been driven from their homes. The corruption would have continued. The council listened carefully, asked questions, and ultimately voted to create a new city office dedicated to HOA oversight and resident advocacy. It was another win, another positive change that came from that frozen February morning. As autumn arrived again, marking 2 years since the theft, I found myself in a reflective mood. My business was more successful than I had ever dreamed. The neighborhood was peaceful and friendly. Brenda was in prison where she belonged. Dylan Carpenter was also serving his sentence. The victims had received justice, and in some cases like the Johnsons, they had been able to reclaim what was taken from them. I drove past Brenda's old house one day and saw the new owners, the couple who were HOA lawyers, sitting on the front porch with their own cups of coffee. They waved, and I waved back. The house that had been the center of so much corruption and pain was now just a normal home with normal people living normal lives. Tom Hendricks called me one evening in October. "Hey Wesley, the board wants to do something special for the 2-year anniversary of Brenda's arrest. We were thinking of having a community celebration, maybe even erecting a small plaque in the community center about standing up against corruption. What do you think?" I think it is a nice idea, but I do not want it to be about me specifically. It should be about the community coming together. That is exactly what we were thinking, a celebration of community resilience and integrity. Will you come speak? Of course. The celebration was held on a Saturday afternoon in late October. The weather was perfect, crisp and clear with colorful leaves everywhere. The community center was decorated with banners and balloons. Someone had set up a barbecue, and the smell of grilled food filled the air. Tom introduced me to speak, and I kept it short and simple. 2 years ago, I had 12 bags of ice melt stolen from my garage. Today, I stand here in a community that is stronger, safer, and more united than ever. That transformation did not happen because of me. It happened because people cared enough to stand up for what was right. It happened because we refused to accept corruption as normal. It happened because we worked together. The crowd applauded, and I saw familiar faces. The Johnsons were there with their kids. Greg Whitmore had shown up, standing at the back with a small smile. My employees from the business were there. Detective Harris came, now retired but still invested in the community he had served. Officer Martinez was there too. After the speeches, people mingled and ate and shared stories. It felt like a real celebration of something meaningful. The plaque was unveiled, and it read, "In recognition of the courage it takes to stand up for justice and the strength found in community unity." As the sun began to set and people started heading home, I found myself standing alone for a moment, looking at that plaque. I thought about the journey from that frozen morning to this warm autumn evening. I thought about how a simple decision to protect my property with GPS trackers had changed everything. My phone buzzed. It was an email from a homeowner in Arizona who had read my blog. They were dealing with an abusive HOA and wanted advice. I smiled and started typing a response. The work was not over. There were still people out there dealing with situations like I had faced. But now there were resources, awareness, and a growing movement to hold HOAs accountable. I finished the email and put my phone away. Tom walked over with 2 beers. "Hell of a day," he said, handing me one. "Hell of a 2 years," I replied. We clinked bottles and watched as the last families packed up to leave. Kids were running around, parents were chatting, and everything felt right. "You ever regret moving here?" Tom asked. I thought about it for a moment. Despite everything that had happened, despite the harassment and the theft and the stress, I looked around at this community that had come together and overcome corruption. "No," I said. "I do not regret it at all, and I meant it." Because sometimes the hardest experiences lead to the most meaningful outcomes. Sometimes standing up to a bully exposes a conspiracy. Sometimes 12 bags of ice melt with GPS trackers can change an entire community. The evening ended, and I drove home to my house on Pinewood Drive. My garage was secure, my business was thriving, and my neighborhood was finally the community it should have been all along. I pulled into my driveway, grabbed the mail from the mailbox, and noticed a letter from the Minnesota Attorney General's office. Inside, I found a letter informing me that I was being recognized as a recipient of the Minnesota Citizen Justice Award for my role in exposing HOA corruption and helping to bring about legislative reform. The award ceremony would be held in St. Paul in December. I sat down at my kitchen table and read the letter again. It felt surreal. 2 years ago, I had been just a guy trying to run a small snow removal business and dealing with an overbearing HOA president. Now I was receiving statewide recognition and helping people across the country deal with similar situations. My phone rang. It was Detective Harris. "Wesley, congratulations on the award. Well deserved." "Thanks. I just got the letter. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Brenda is coming up for a parole hearing in 5 years. It is just preliminary information, but victims have the right to submit impact statements when that time comes. She has only served 2 years of an 18-year sentence. There is no way she is getting out." "Probably not, but I wanted you to be aware. Also, Dylan Carpenter is eligible for parole in 10 years with good behavior. Same deal with the impact statements. I appreciate the heads up." After hanging up, I thought about Brenda sitting in prison. I wondered if she understood the magnitude of what she had done. I wondered if she felt any remorse for the families she had hurt. Probably not. People like Brenda rarely saw themselves as the villains in their own stories, but that was not my concern anymore. She was facing the consequences of her actions, and I had moved on to building something positive from the wreckage she had left behind. December came, and I attended the award ceremony in St. Paul. The state capitol building was beautiful, decorated for the holidays. I wore a suit and felt slightly uncomfortable in formal attire, but the ceremony itself was moving. There were 5 other recipients, all people who had stood up for justice in various ways. When it was my turn to accept the award, the Attorney General herself presented it to me. Wesley Ackerman recognized corruption in his community and had the courage to see the investigation through to its conclusion. His actions led to the exposure of a multi-year criminal conspiracy, the conviction of those responsible, and legislative reform that has protected thousands of Minnesota homeowners. His story reminds us that ordinary citizens can make an extraordinary difference. The applause echoed through the chamber, and I shook hands with the Attorney General, holding the plaque that represented not just my story but the stories of all the victims who had been brave enough to come forward. That night, as I drove back to Rochester, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter that had begun with stolen ice melt and GPS trackers was truly complete. Brenda was in prison. Dylan was in prison. The HOA had been reformed. Laws had been changed. Justice had been served. But more than that, a community had been healed. Families had been made whole. People felt safe in their homes again. And that was worth more than any award or recognition. I pulled into my driveway just before midnight. Snow was starting to fall, the first real snow of the season. I sat in my truck for a moment, watching the flakes drift down in the streetlight's glow. Tomorrow, I would be back to work, plowing driveways and laying down ice melt. The business that had started all of this would continue, but now with 3 trucks, 5 employees, and enough GPS track supplies to handle anything. I got out of the truck and walked to my front door. As I unlocked it, I glanced over at where my garage stood secure and well lit. I thought about those 12 bags of ice melt and the trackers hidden inside them. Such a simple precaution that had led to such massive consequences. Inside, I hung up my coat and set the award plaque on my mantle. It joined other reminders of the journey. A framed newspaper article, a thank you card from the Johnson family, and a photo from the community celebration. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Tom. "Saw you on the news accepting the award. The whole neighborhood is proud of you." "Beers tomorrow to celebrate," I smiled and typed back. "Sounds perfect." I turned off the lights and headed to bed. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the neighborhood in white. Somewhere in Minnesota's prison system, Brenda Whitmore was spending another night behind bars, paying for her crimes. Dylan Carpenter was doing the same. And here in Meadowbrook Hills, life went on peacefully, the way it always should have been. Because one person had decided to stand up, and others had found the courage to stand with him. All because of 12 bags of ice melt and the GPS trackers that brought a criminal conspiracy crashing down.